Welcome to the Seahawks Draft Blog Instant Reaction live stream. Rob Staton, Robbie Williams, Adam Nathan here to pick through the bones of Seattle's defeat to the Atlanta Falcons, a game that featured two of the worst defensive performances I think I've ever seen. You know, both units were absolutely honking. I mean, they were absolutely horrendous. And do you know what? It's actually quite hard to gauge how well the offenses actually were, because you could easily come out of this game and go, wow, Cordero Patterson was brilliant, or Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Marcus Mariota. And on the other side, Geno Smith played well. And, the way they used the tight ends, and Ken Walker had that run. You could easily sort of go through those things, but look who they both were playing. The offenses were playing horrible defensive units. And in the end, Atlanta's defensive unit managed to find that one play, a Grady Jarrett sack, which got them through the game. And wouldn't have even needed that if Marcus Mariota could handle that little exchange he had with the running back at the end of the game. They probably would have just run out the clock, got a field goal, whatever, and would have won the game anyway. So there we go. The Seahawks have lost to a winless team at home. And my big takeaway from this, Robbie and Adam, and I'll come to you first, Robbie, is how many years in a row do the Seahawks have to play like utter crap on defense to start the season? It happens every single year. What are they doing during training camp? What are they doing during preseason? They can't tackle. They don't have any pass rush. They don't come close to turning the ball over with their defensive backs. When you don't get a sniff of an interception, really. Every single year, it's the same thing. It takes them weeks to warm up. And sometimes they never get warm. They're just crap for the whole year. And you have a defensive-minded head coach. They've changed all of the staff. Everybody's changed. They've talked about tweaking things here, and Clint Hurt will say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then Pete Carroll comes up and goes, well, it's actually not that different than it has been in the past. No kidding, Pete. It's still rubbish. When is this ever going to change? And the finger of blame has to be pointed at the head coach, because this happens year after year after year. And Robbie, it is not good enough. Rebuild or no rebuild, the defense can't be making. How many more years do we have to see this? If they go into the draft next year and draft one of these young quarterbacks, and let's just say they end up being the next big thing in the NFL, are they going to be let down by the defense every single year? This is Pete Carroll's problem that he has to find solutions to immediately.
Yeah, it's at a point now where, Pete Carroll has to be held accountable for how this defense is playing. And, they talk about the scheme shift from a 4-3 to a 3-4. It looks worse. Darrell Taylor is playing terrible. The linebackers are playing terrible. They look out of position. They just don't look like they're ready to play the game. I don't understand why. And you're right. This seems to happen every year. I'm frustrated with the tackling. I mean, it's been game after game, missed tackles, not wrapping up. None of it makes really any sense. For an NFL franchise, they just don't look like they're ready to play. I'm super confused how they're off to this the same thing that they've done year after year after year, and he needs to be held accountable for this. I mean, he's a defensive-minded head coach. He should know what to be doing, and there should be adjustments made. Why are the adjustments don't look like they're made even at halftime? It's really bad.
They don't do one thing well. They can't even go out there and say, we're going to make Atlanta beat us in the passing game. We're going to make them one-dimensional. We're going to take away the run. They'll start off the game, and it's almost like, okay, we're going to try and take away that interior run now. We'll take away that, and then they can't do that against the Niners. Okay, we'll try and get to the perimeter. They can't take it. Teams are beating Seattle by running up the gut. They're beating Seattle by running outside. When the quarterback's dropping back, just look at that first half for Mariota. Every time he dropped back, he was just throwing it very easily to Kyle Pitts and to Drake London, and he could kind of do whatever he wanted. The defense, how many years do we have to have Pete Carroll say it's a priority to fix the pass rush? And it just never happens. And they've got some guys now. It's not like they're trotting out Benson Mayowa like they were last year on like 90% of the snaps. They've got Darrell Taylor. Where's his development? He's supposed to be taking the next step this year. He's awful. Either the scheme's not suiting him, or they're not doing a good job adapting him to this scheme, and they're not finding ways around it to make him impactful. He's supposed to be an impact player. Why does Jordan Brooks get praise? Why do people talk about Jordan Brooks like he's arrived in the NFL already and is a good player? What is he showing to warrant any of this? Why are they paying Quandre Diggs as much as he is to play like that today? Adam, have you got any answers?
I don't have any answers. This may come across as an excuse, but I suppose and this is by design because it's the players they've drafted and they selected. I suppose you could say the back end was very undermanned in terms of what you may have expected the secondary to look like going into the season. I mean, Jones, I'm not even sure I've ever heard of that bloke before he played today. Obviously, Sidney Jones sounded like it was a healthy scratch. Again, that's their decision that they've made. But yeah, I heard, I was listening to a podcast when someone was talking about the Broncos of all teams and saying that they look like they need to have another training camp. And it kind of feels the same way about the Seahawks defense at the minute. Like everyone's in the right position nominally to start with. But it's like they've done all of their tape study and all of their drills when they sort of stand around like mannequins and say, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But any sort of misdirection or the slightest bit of trickery or, unexpected route running, they just look a bit lost, don't they? I mean, there was the odd delayed handoff from Mariota. There was a couple of delayed throws, albeit, London and Pitts are two terrific players. But everyone has two very good players on offense now. And it really was only two from a pass catching perspective that had to hurt you. And they just looked a bit lost, really, didn't they?
I mean, on Jones, awful, but Josh Jones, let's not forget, is the guy that won the job at training camp who they've gone with. And they've decided to discard the guy they spent a second-round pick on, and let them, we can say it now, wasted a second-round pick on in Marquise Blair. And they've gone with Josh Jones, and he's not very good. That's why he's a former second-round pick who's got dumped as well. I'd like to suggest, fellas, that I don't think if Artie Burns and Sidney Jones had been playing in this game, that they would have made that much difference. I don't think that Shelby Harris necessarily would have made much difference. The defense just isn't working, Robbie. Whatever they've done to try and get tweak these schemes, it seems very clear to me that Pete Carroll is still too heavily involved. That what we were hoping for was that Clint Hurt, background in Vic Fangio's scheme. Sean Desai, background in Vic Fangio's scheme. They were going to get together and we were going to see Vic Fangio's scheme, which involves a lot of creative pressure from everywhere. And I get it. Like Jamal Adams would have been a big part of that because he's very good at doing those blitzing from different. It's the one thing he does really, really well, Jamal Adams, and he's not there. I get that. But just because he's not there doesn't mean you just throw everything out and then kind of have this abomination that we're seeing now, which is, it doesn't seem like any of the players that they've got are suiting this. Like Poona Ford. What's Poona Ford's impact been after 3 weeks? It's like this scheme change, if anything, has taken away one of the few players who's played well, one of the few who's actually played well over the last couple of years and made him redundant because he doesn't fit this scheme. Darrell Taylor, who showed a bit of promise last year, doesn't fit this scheme by the looks of things, or it's going to take him an age to adjust to it. It just seems like a mismatch of, well, Carroll kind of wants to do his stuff and we'll put in a couple of elements that Clint Hurt wants. No, it needed to be a complete, we're going all in, Vic Fangio defense. That's what it needed to be, or it needed to stay somewhat to what it was. And in what we've got is this Frankenstein's monster of a defense, Robbie, which looks rubbish. It looks really bad. And they played Atlanta today. Imagine what the Rams are going to do. Imagine they're playing Patrick Mahomes later this season. Do they play the Chargers as well? They do. I mean, just think what some of these teams are going to do to this defense if it doesn't improve immediately.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and you had said it right there, like they made all these promises towards the preseason. You're going to see all these changes, all these things. Clint Hurt sounded like a future head coach the way he was talking, and all these things, and it just comes back to show you that Pete has his hand in this way too much. The scheme doesn't look really all that different. I mean, I don't see any creative blitzes at all. I don't see us getting to the quarterback. Mariota had all the time in the world to throw the football today, all the time. And you imagine a better quarterback. There was a couple throws he overthrew people that were open. You're right. When we played the Rams, the Chiefs, it needs to be fixed now. Like it literally cannot go any longer if we want to win any more football games. And this is a team I actually thought we were going to win today. I thought this is a team we should beat these guys. They're just not that good. And they came out and they looked incredible. I mean, other than their defense as well, but they made us look just silly, just absolutely silly.
We've got a super chat from Squatch. Thank you for the support. And if you have a super chat, listen, what we do with this is if you want a question answering, send in a super chat. We will come to it ASAP. Squatch says, we don't have a single position group on defense that is even average. How is that even possible, considering we haven't had a decent defense since 2017? And it's true. There isn't a single part of the defense that you would, I was going to say hang your hat on, but like he says, is even average. And the thing for me, Adam, is I don't really mind that they lost this game. I can't say that I was particularly invested in the Seahawks winning the game, because it's that kind of year. I sit and watch the games and observe and take it in. And if the Seahawks win, I will smile and be happy. And if they lose, I will analyze it. And we'll take every game as it is. But what I am invested in is belief and hope. I want to come out of this season thinking, yeah, do you know what? With a good draft and a good free agency, they can be a team again in 2023 that can start to sort of move forward in the way that a team like the Miami Dolphins are moving forward. You know, like a team like that that's sort of like an upstart. They're moving forward in the right direction. And when I watch the defense play like this, Pete Carroll's defense play like this, losing a game to the 0-2 Falcons with that defense that they were fielding, all hope is extinguished, because I just cannot have any faith, Adam. Pete Carroll, for me, just looks like he has outstayed his welcome big time. And it's time for some new ideas and a new approach, because this ain't good enough. We can't have this defense to start every single season. We just can't.
Yeah, I think I've said on this show every time since the trade that, you know, all we can really hope for this year is, can we see some green shoots for the future that make you think, right, well, I can see what they're doing here, whether that's players or scheme. And as it happens, I think someone like Waldron today maybe gave me the most hope I've ever had in him, that he might be an offensive coordinator for the future, the way he schemed some guys open. But on Pete Carroll, I mean, this may have been a misquote because the announcers were so bad all game that perhaps this carried it through. But at halftime, the sideline report said that Pete Carroll said that the running game has opened up everything for Geno Smith in the first half. I hope that was a misquote, because, I mean, I'm not the biggest Geno fan, but he was terrific in the first half, and everything that he and Waldron were scheming up was working. And then Curtis Allen is sort of writing a transcript of Pete's press conference after the game, and he's saying that Cordarrelle Patterson was the reason the Falcons won the game with his rushing. And it's just nonsense. It's nonsense. Like, Patterson supplemented what Mariota and Pitts and London were doing really well. And, you know, he had a career game. It's not to say he wasn't terrific, but I would much rather they had Cordarrelle Patterson in this game than Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Only one of those combinations won in the game, and Mariota. Patterson was fine, but, you know, he sort of took the yards he was given, a couple of decent runs. But ultimately, if the mindset is that we need the run to open this game up and we have to stop the run from start to finish, we're just going to get this sort of stodginess, I think, that's not really going to take us far.
Yeah, agreed. Jonathan says the scheme can change all it wants. As long as they have this talent level, the results will stay the same. Well, look, Jonathan, they definitely need some more talent. You know, I will not argue that this is a talent-rich defense, because it's clearly not. They don't have a cornerback they can hang their hat on. You know, they've just got a bit of hope that someone like Tariq Woolen can emerge to be a consistent starter. That's it. That's all they have at cornerback. I don't think either linebacker is very good, frankly. I don't think that either they don't suit what they're trying to do, or they're not very good, because they're not showing to be very good at the moment. I don't think Quandre Diggs is a superstar safety, even though he's been paid very handsomely. And I don't think Jamal Adams is either. And I don't think they have a proven blue chip pass rusher. I think they've got a collection of pieces. And again, we've got more hope than actual proven ability there. But what I will say is that you can still expect a team to tackle. You can still expect a team to scheme some production in the pass rush. You can still expect not to be giving up explosive play after explosive play after explosive play when you have a coach who is supposed to be defensive minded and has put a big investment into the staff. You can expect to be better than this. I mean, I'm not expecting to see the LOB, Robbie and Adam. I just expect to see better than this. The performance is really, really bad. There was at one point where it just felt there's an explosive play and there's another explosive play and there's another explosive play. I mean, it was hard to keep up and tally how many plus 15, 20 yard plays Atlanta had. It just felt like it was one after the other. And the defense is really, really bad. And I mean, sorry, Robbie, can I just make this quick point? I do fear a little bit that the conversation is going to we're going to go down a blind alley this week. I think that I suspect that the conversation among Seahawks fans and in the media will be the defense is so bad. Look at the offense. It's great. It's fine. Geno's fine. Everything's fine. That would be a huge mistake to make that. Let's acknowledge that Atlanta's defense was equally rubbish today. And when Geno Smith plays and this offense play good defenses, they'll get what we had last week, which was absolutely nada, zilch. And there were times today when I thought pretty much anybody could have played quarterback for either of those two teams because it was just they were playing such bad defenses. And look, Geno Smith did reasonably well. He did good. I mean, as Adam said, he played well in the first half. He had some really good throws. Let's not get carried away, though. He should have had an interception. He should have had another interception, and then he finally had one at the end. So let's not get down this road, please. That would be my point. Seattle's big priority is to find a quarterback of the future. It's just clear that their imminent priority, Robbie, needs to be getting this defense right because the fans are owed some hope and belief. And with this defense, they ain't getting it.
Yeah, I think the worst part, as Curtis is posting, what Pete Carroll's press conference, he literally says, "I think you saw us get better today." What?
Right, what? Is that an actual quote?
That's an actual quote from Pete Carroll.
Is that a joke quote?
No, Pete Carroll actually said, "I think you saw us get better today." That's for real. That's a real Pete Carroll quote from Curtis. He wrote it. I don't get that at all. I don't know what he's seen that he thinks we got better at what. I mean,
but the kickoff's better.
I don't know what to say about that. I don't know.
What was better about that?
Well, you know what he's going to say. He's going to say we rushed for over 100 yards. Tyler Lockett and DK both got involved. Geno looked clean when we were on schedule. So that's what he's going to say. We're not going to agree with it, but that's what he will point to as sort of the eternal optimist, won't he?
I think sometimes you just have to. I think you have to front up and you have to eat one. I think this is. I've felt for a while now that Pete Carroll tends to take the piss a little bit. That he treats us like we're idiots sometimes. What he says about this isn't a rebuild and we're this and we're Geno Smith and Drew, we may have two number one quarterbacks. And the whole, the Russell Wilson thing was a great big media creation last year. And it was like, oh, come on. Do you really think we're that? I mean, obviously some people were that stupid because they spent all summer saying, see, it was the media's fault for bringing that up. And then they all acted surprised when the trade was announced. Well, some people did anyway. I mean, look, this is another reason why I was thinking all week, because Richard Sherman did a podcast with KJ Wright this week and they were talking about Russell Wilson again. And I thought, you know what? We're never going to move on from that. We're never, ever going to move on from that until Carroll's gone. Until that era gets a line drawn under it, this team is going to live under the shadow of all that bollocks until this era finishes. And I thought, we need to move on from this. I'm ready to see the new Seahawks, where all of that stuff is just a boring sideshow that no one cares about anymore. But while ever Pete's there, it's going to be this way. And now watching his defense, I feel it even more. I'm ready for something different. And it's hard. And I know that, look, you can easily make a change and end up with a Nathaniel Hackett who had to appoint this week basically someone to tell him what to do in certain situations. And I do not. You obviously don't want a head coach like that. But, I mean, the Miami Dolphins just beat the best team in the NFL with their quarterback concussed throughout the whole second half. And both teams had injuries, but Miami had a laundry list of injuries again today. And they beat the Buffalo Bills. And Mike McDaniel is already looking like a wizard. Get me a wizard. Get me somebody who can imagine if he was in charge now. Or even if Doug Peterson, Seattle-born or Washington-raised Doug Peterson, who's just leading the Jaguars into a new era. Imagine if he was in charge now. It would be new and it would be fresh, and you'd be thinking, okay, Like, look at the Eagles. They drew a line under the Doug Peterson era. They just went and get some guy who couldn't even do his first press conference properly. And within 12 months, they're actually looking like one of the best teams in the league. Like, they could be a Super Bowl contender in the NFC. It's not hard. You can find people and move on. It doesn't have to be Carroll forever until Carroll decides that he's had enough. And it does feel, I'm afraid to say, Adam, like we are all here for his benefit rather than the other way around.
Well, look, I think from a discourse perspective, and no one wants the team to lose ever, obviously, because we're up at 1 o'clock in the morning watching them, so we don't want them to lose. But I remember you probably took quite a bit of stick last year for having this view last year, and then all of a sudden, when the team sort of drifted away from playoff contention, there was a lot of, oh yeah, actually, you may have had a point in what you were saying about that, and maybe they're not right. And it'll be interesting to see how quickly the discourse changes this year, because I think this is the year that the team will have Tell the Truth Monday tomorrow. This really needs to be a Tell the Truth season. Where is this team? What are we going to do to get back to being a championship team? Now you can still do that by winning games this year, and all we want to do is see them do well and try. Can we see the draft picks looking good? And they are looking better. This year's draft looks okay. I mean, you're not really hearing the names of the tackles, which is always a good thing. I think Maffei maybe contributed quite well, but it's just everything just sort of is a little bit stuck in the mud by the lack of general direction. I don't really know what the plan is. And that's probably the thing that's going to rankle. And we can't, at the end of this draft, although the picks for the trade are gone, and then you're sort of back to being in normality. So the concern is that I'm not entirely convinced that the direction of the team going into March and April is going to be as unified in a Mike McDaniel direction, for example, as we want. And it may just be sort of doubling down on what we have already. And I don't really think that's the way that you're going to build a championship team in the NFL.
Yeah, I think Jason has sent a super chat, and keep those coming. Get me a wizard, the 2023 off-season catchphrase. Well, it'd be nice to think that it would be Jason. I think it'll be here we go again is probably going to be the 2023 off-season catchphrase. Sorry, I've added that one as well there. I'll hide that. It's just becoming very, very difficult to sort of believe in the direction of the team. It's really hard, and I already voiced some concerns, Robbie, after the win against Denver. I said it. I'm not. This will sound incredibly I told you so, and well, I will own that if that's how it sounds. But it did feel far too much like they celebrated that win and that they put everything into that win like it was the Super Bowl. And now we've just seen the reality. They've bore their arse for everybody to see since then in these two games against San Francisco and Atlanta. And they partied hard when they beat Wilson and the Broncos and put everything into that. But I think all that game has told us, really, off the back of this, and the subsequent game against Houston, and that may change in a few hours when Denver have played San Francisco. Maybe we'll feel differently about this, but it certainly looks to me like the Seahawks may have been right to move on from Russell Wilson, but they only did half the job. And getting picks for Wilson now this year was probably the best thing to do, based on the way Wilson's playing, although he has started cold for the Seahawks in many years, even in his peak years. So we'll see what happens there. But it may have been right to move on from him, but they needed to move on from the coach as well. That it wasn't an either or, it should have been both.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I don't know if I could have predicted that, back when this was going on. I think, it was one or the other for me, and that one of them needed to go. But, the way they celebrated the Broncos win, it kind of reminds me of the way they celebrated when they beat the Rams to take the NFC West. And then, when we got to play them in the championship, we got our asses handed to us by, a broken down Jared Goff. It just seems like, they take those wins, and I know he preaches that, every game's a championship opportunity, but I think at some point it's becoming stale. Like the things he says are becoming stale. They become boring. I don't believe, like, I don't even like his press conferences. Like they're just not even believable. And like you said, he almost treats us like we're idiots, and that it is our benefit to be in his presence for and it's starting, you're going to lose it. Like he's losing the fan base. I mean, clearly, I think everyone wanted him to beat Russell Like, I mean, we want them to win, right? Clearly we want them to win. Like Adam was saying, we don't ever want to see our team lose. But, when you start to lose and you lose in this fashion and you don't see dramatic changes, you're losing the fan base, right? And there's got to be a lot of questions. And then coming out and saying, well, I think you saw us play better. You gotta, like you said, own up. Like, take one for the team. And you suck it up, say, hey, we maybe we just played like shit tonight and we need to play better. Then, just say that. Like, it's okay to say that. But I just don't. I'm at this point. I'm tired of listening to him talk about it.
Yeah, you're right. You can't. Sometimes it is just best to come out and say it, and fans will appreciate that, and it will actually buy you a bit more time. I mean, I've watched 2 sporting events in the last 48 hours where the coach has overseen a horrendous performance and a loss, and then has come out after the game and said, "Well, that was an improved performance." And fans are not stupid. Fans can see that that's not good, and a bit of accountability sometimes can go a long way. Look, I've interviewed so many coaches over the last 15 years, and I've some of the best have come out afterwards and just said it how it is after, and the fans have just gone, fair enough, because I appreciate that bit of honesty. You're not treating me like someone who's stupid here. And I think that really sometimes that is the best thing to do. I think coaches kind of get caught up in this ultra got to be positive all the time speak. You do run the risk of losing a fan base when you try and pull the wool over their eyes and try and BS them a little bit. And I think that with what he said there after that game, I certainly think that's true. Adam, I will say this, though. I just wonder, are we getting into a habit here where Seahawks fans are assuming that certain players are playing well? Because I've already mentioned Jordan Brooks, who I don't think has ever really shown anything to warrant the first-round pick that Seattle spent on him. He had a bunch of tackles last year, so did Bobby Wagner, and they cut Bobby Wagner. I don't think he's ever played particularly well, and I don't think he's playing very well at all this year. And I'm afraid to say the assumption is that the 2 rookie offensive tackles are playing really well. Now, I thought they had a really easy day today against a bad pass rush. But right at the end of the game, Charles Cross got driven back into Geno Smith and gave up a huge sack. Now, the Seahawks somehow, this doesn't often happen. I think it was like 3rd and 2nd and 20 or something like that, or it was they managed to work their way out of it. And then in the end, the big sack again from Jarrett, where he beat the center, I think it was, or was it Damian Lewis, and got into the backfield and sacked Geno Smith. That was it was a sack too far. But Charles Cross has got to get stronger. We've seen this now in a couple of games, and I said it when they drafted him. He has to be stronger. Now, maybe that he just needs time for that. But he was bulldozed on that play. Was it Lorenzo Carter who did it? Who is a lean, quick, twitchy pass rusher. He's not a power merchant. And he had Charles Cross's lunch money there. If he's going to be a starting left tackle in the NFL who is reliable, he has to be stronger than that.
Yeah, I think this team is kind of playing like the embodiment of that. I think it's a Mike Tyson quote of like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. They're like a Goldilocks team at the moment where everything's great as long as it's not too hot or it's not too cold. But there doesn't appear to be many answers when they get off schedule, either on offense or defense. One holding penalty or one sack basically proved to be a drive killer and a match loser in the second half today. There's definitely questions to be made about how 6 points in 3 second halves. There's obviously something not right there when it comes to adjustments. They're getting out adjusted quite drastically, especially given Denver and today the first half was so promising, and the second half is like, well, we're just going to change this, that, and that, and you got nothing. So, there's some players like Charles Cross that, if he has a Goldilocks year, that's fine. You hope that he comes back next year and is better. But with Taylor and Brooks, you're right. I think you have to expect more. They have been brought in to replace, to replace sort of the legends of the team that at times of when we needed a play, they would make it. And funnily enough, when Nwosu fell on that ball, after the fumbled handoff, I thought, blimey, like maybe there's a bit of stardust left, but it just didn't manifest itself. And so I think the issue that we're going to have in a lot of games is that it's just tricky to really analyze it at all. which is a ridiculous thing to say, given the fact that we're half an hour into a podcast and we're supposed to be trying to analyze it. But I can't imagine they'll play against a worse position group than the Falcons defense all season. I've not, got the exact schedule in front of me, but they were rotten. I mean, outside of Jarrett and AJ Terrell, I mean, they would have done well to see off a college offense, that Falcons defense. And they still just sort of, when one play goes against them, they're knackered. And part of that's a Geno Smith thing, and that's fine. Like, that's what you have to expect with a career backup quarterback. But, then they've got to get the right guy in after that. And I'm sure we'll talk about how that pool is thinning of guys. And there's not a lot out there that makes me think that in times of adversity, they can pull themselves up by the bootstraps and go and win a game. And that's what I'm finding slightly concerning at the minute, watching this team.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Sorry. Can I
go ahead?
The thing that's frustrating about like the second half play, like in the first half, they were playing up tempo. You know what I mean? They were getting to the line of scrimmage. They were letting Geno kind of call audibles. They started doing it again a little bit again in the second half. But I don't know why they go away with that. They did that with Russ too. When Russ ran up tempo, we played really, really well. I don't know why they go away from that. They seem to like slow it down. I don't know. It's super frustrating, but when they play up tempo, they seem to play really, really well and they move the ball. So if the second half, they adjust and start slowing it down and they just don't move the ball and then penalties kick in and then they just like abandon everything that they do. It's super frustrating.
Well, I think one thing what I was going to bring up is I think Adam's kind of hit on a point there that I thought the team against Denver looked gritty as hell. Like they were really they punched the Broncos in the face and gave them a game. And I thought that was really encouraging to see a bit of that old spark come back. And it was only in that game. We saw none of that against the Niners, and we saw none of that today. They look like a finesse team today in every way. The soft defense and the passing offense being the dominant feature on offense. They did not look like a team that was full of grit and anger and piss and vinegar. They just don't look like that team. And they did in week one. And it goes down to this fact that it seems to me like they treated, like KJ Wright came out in that podcast on 710 Seattle Sports and said that Pete Carroll treated that game like a Super Bowl, that he made it personal, he got him right up for that game, and that he dropped the ball because he didn't have them ready to play against the Niners. And to me, they just haven't been able to recapture that anger and that absolute, we're going to go and dig in the trenches here, that they showed against Denver. And I think that is another concerning thing. One thing I wanted to ask you about, guys, is DK Metcalf. So DK Metcalf didn't play badly today. He got a nice touchdown, really good touchdown catch. But let me just, I don't know if you're aware of this. He had, in this game, 12 targets. He only had 5 catches. So they've thrown the ball at him 12 times, 5 catches for 64 yards and that touchdown. Aside from that touchdown, which was a really good play, he will have had 4 catches for 46 yards. And in his previous 2 games, 4 catches for 35 yards, 7 catches for 36. They are paying DK Metcalf $24 million a year. And the early signs are they do not have any idea how to feature him to the max ability of that contract. Is that fair to say? Or is it too early? Because, I mean, he's not a young player. He's not just joined the team. He's not just meeting Geno Smith for the first time here. And they are not getting him the production he needs to justify that contract. Not even close.
Yeah, I think right off the gate, I mean, Geno doesn't have the deep ball that Russ has. He can't throw it that deep. And I think they're not using him properly. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. I mean, apparently he got that many targets. I just don't remember, if all the balls were really that good or if they were catchable. I know he did drop one that I remember. But I think, DK is one of those guys that I think bringing in a new quarterback next year, if they have that deep ball, you're going to want him around. I think it might be a little too early to say it was a bad idea to pay him.
I'm not. Let me clear. I am not saying it's a bad idea to pay him. I'm saying if you do pay him, you have to have a better plan than this to get him production.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I just don't know if I don't know, man. I don't know if they have it seems like that Pete doesn't know how to use skill players very well. Unless it's a beast running back who can run for him. I don't think he knows how to use skill players. I mean, we've seen it time and time again.
I've been quite interested watching the last 3 games because the common wisdom would have been, well, Russ and Tyler had such an amazing relationship. They knew where each other would be, that Lockett might be the one that falls off. But Lockett, in the way, feels like a more of a QB proof wide receiver than DK at the moment, watching them in the pockets of space that he picks up. I just don't think Geno's got the touch for someone like DK. I don't think he has that knack of lofting it over a defender's arm, or even like the touchdown throw today was putting it in a place where 70% only DK could get that ball. And that's okay because he can fight to win that. But the previous one, when Terrell in the corner managed to get it away, like that ball should have been put in a place where only DK could get it. And there was one where it looked like it was a bad drop, but I think 54 on the Falcons managed to get a little finger to it. The throws from Geno, I don't think are really the ones that DK wants. And Russ used to do that particularly well, of just putting it in a position where not only DK can get it, but DK will go and get it and use his size. But I don't think that Geno throws the ball in a way that facilitates what a physical specimen DK is. That might be complete rubbish, but that's just my sort of instinct, having not watched any of the tape, but just sort of going on my gut instinct of watching the replays and the throws from today.
I think as well, I just think the Seahawks are just a whole big bunch of contradictions. I think we've seen it a little bit with the defense. We're going to appoint Vic Fangio guys who are part of one scheme, but we're kind of going to do a horrible Frankenstein's monster of other stuff as well, and we end up with this. And then I think on offense, we've got Pete Carroll's way of doing stuff, which involves a heavy dose of running the ball and playing a certain style. And yet you've got so much invested in your receivers, and there's somewhat of a bit of a pressure now to get them involved. But you also spent a second-round pick on a running back, and yet you've signed the other running back who ended last season so well. They've got and then they want to get the tight ends involved, which is great. It's great to see the tight ends being involved. But there's only so much that you can do. And rather than it sort of being like, oh, what a great smorgasbord of options they've got here, which way are the Seahawks going to beat you this week? It doesn't all seem to be fitting together into one clear thing. And I also think that you sort of see some teams and they'll come into it and they go, okay, our game plan, we're going to attack a team this way. We're going to be very deliberate with this. And then when they throw a counter punch, we're going to anticipate what they're going to adjust with. So then we're going to hit them with this. It never quite feels like the Seahawks have got that. It kind of feels like the Seahawks come in with a plan. They have some scripted plays. They have some success perhaps early on. And then the adjustment part isn't their strong suit on offense. And then it can become a bit predictable. And we've heard people like Chris Sims say, they've got a very predictable offense and stuff like that when he watches back their tape. So there's some legitimacy to that. And I just don't think there's that sort of clarity really on what they're trying to be at offensively. It's just sort of course we'll keep DK. He's a great player, but we don't know how to make the most of the fact that we're paying him essentially a quarterback salary, $24 million a year. Do you want some good news, fellas?
Always.
Here is the good news. I am going to share the screen so that you can see the good news. So if you will just give me 2 seconds, I will pull this up. And here we go. Da, 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 da. That is the 2023 NFL draft order. And you can see this is via Tankathon, which is a great website that if you're a Seahawks fan, you will want to become very familiar with. The Seahawks are currently picking third in the NFL draft, with the Las Vegas Raiders and the Houston Texans, the only 2 remaining teams in front of them. And Houston could have and should have had a win by now. As it happens, it's not completely great news because the Raiders are 0-3 and have started abysmally. Now, I don't think they're going to trade or cut Derek Carr a year after trading for his best mate, Devontae Adams. I would think that those 2 are tied at the hip somewhat. But if you look at Derek Carr's contract, there's a cap hit of $34.8 million next year and only a dead cap hit of $5 million. So if they wanted to get rid of him, they'd save $30 million. So if they end up picking first overall, I would suggest that they're probably going to take a quarterback there. and move on from Derek Carr, or keep Derek Carr for another year and then potentially move on from him. So that's that. Houston, Davis Mills threw a horrendous interception at the end of the game today to blow that game for Houston against Chicago. But the slightly better news is Atlanta won, and that means that they're out of it because you'd think they're going to be in the mix for a high pick. Carolina won, which is great news because they're going to be very much in the mix for a high pick. And New Orleans, who need a quarterback, for some stupid reason, gave their first-round pick this year to the Philadelphia Eagles, which is all great for them, isn't it? What a genius Howie Roseman looks right now, because he's got a great team and also the number 8 overall pick. And I know it's very early days. I'm not reading too much into this. But the point is that right now, the Seahawks are in a very strong position to be drafting very, very high. And if they can't even beat the Atlanta Falcons at home, guys, then what chances have they got of this schedule down the road when they're going to be playing the Chiefs and some of these NFC West teams? I mean, they're playing the Lions on the road next week, and the Lions, they're losing, but they're playing with grit and determination. They're kind of doing what you kind of want the Seahawks to be doing. They're missing that one piece, which is the quarterback, obviously, and maybe one other piece on defense or something. It's what you want to see from the Seahawks. We're not seeing it, but that if they lose that next week and are 1-3, that's when I think the schedule gets a little tougher. And for people who are wondering what it is, they then go to the Saints. Okay, not the hardest game, but I just don't really fancy the Seahawks in that. Then they play the Cardinals, and they go on the road to the Chargers. Then they host the Giants, who started well, and then they're at the Cardinals again. So it gets harder than that down the road. But Robbie, there's some losable games amongst that bunch there.
Yeah, for sure. And then after our bye week, we play the Raiders. So if the Raiders keep tanking, and I'm guessing they'll probably start winning some games here. But if they don't, and the Raiders beat us, that'll put us in actually even a better position as well. So yeah, our schedule doesn't look all that great, going forward. So I mean, there was a couple games here I thought we for sure were going to win, and this is one of them. So I don't really trust us winning too many more after what I've been seeing, unless, like you said, they improve quickly. But it's hard to see that.
Adam, are you enthused by this draft talk in September the 26th here in England?
I think the interesting thing is when deep down do the team start thinking about it? Because Pete Carroll would probably, try and slap you or do whatever he possibly could do to you if he heard you talking like this after 3 games of the year, when he's gone all out with you, always compete. And there is one Seahawk player that I speak to on a semi-regular basis, and he joked on Friday to me that he didn't have the stones to face me after the embarrassment of the 49ers game, and they have to get back on track. So not that you'd expect anything less from actual paid professional athletes, but they really do care about winning at the minute. No one there is looking forward to next year or what's going to come from that. So, but the interesting thing is, if you have many more losses like today, you can lose to the Niners, you can get slapped by them. They're a good team. They got, it was tricky conditions, but many more games like you have today, and that's the kind of loss that you can start getting some disillusionment in the locker room, I would imagine. So it'll be interesting to see when sort of the team focus starts to not outwardly, because they would never say that, but I wonder how many more losses like that it's going to take for Schneider to get on tankathon.com and bookmark it as a favorite.
Yeah, I mean, the bad side of this really is that, having spent the whole of this morning watching the quarterbacks again, who are eligible for the 2023 draft, what I would just suggest is, I did a video the other day and someone was like, Staton's being negative again. Well, look, I have watched every game that the top quarterbacks have played so far in college football this year. It is a mammoth task every weekend to sit through hours and hours of college football tape in order to be able to sort of present an opinion to you guys. But this media suggestion that this is a world-class quarterback class that is going to change the game forever is nonsense. I mean, the quarterbacks are just not playing as well as the media are telling you. Now, I will do a video on this probably on Tuesday, and I've got an article that's already written, which is going to go on Monday, talking about what I saw this weekend. Will Levis is playing well, not at his best. CJ Stroud's playing well. Has still got plenty of things to iron out. Bryce Young could have a cigar against Vanderbilt. It was that easy for him. It was barely even worth watching the game. Jaron Hall at BYU is playing very, very well. The rest of the picture is not, there are not many answers and solutions here, I'm afraid. There's not this sort of Joe Burrow style ×3 quarterback who's emerging. You think, I cannot wait to see him in Seattle. That is not happening. And I also have to say that some of the other players that you kind of want to see, you know, if you're hoping for, I want 5 or 6 other guys who are not quarterbacks to really step up to the plate here, it ain't happening. It is not happening. Will Anderson's very, very good. I think Brian Bresee is very good, but he's not Aaron Donald and he's not Grady Jarrett. He is a very good defensive tackle. There's not a lot else, I'm afraid. You know, there's not that much that's getting the juices flowing from this draft class so far. And that worries me a little bit. It does worry me a little bit because this is the draft when you've got all the picks. You know, unless you're going to sort of pass them off into the year after, you know, what are you going to do? This has to be the foundation building draft. Now, players can still emerge. That always happens. But I was kind of hoping that we'd see a ton of quarterbacks, a ton of other positional players who deserve top 10 grades, and we could all get really pumped in it and excited for this. I have to say, so far, that's not the experience I've had. And we're now, 4 weeks into the college football season. It's, you know, we've had a quarter of the season already. Sorry, not a quarter, a third of the season already. So we've got a super chat from Corey. Any last super chats in before we finish? It'll be much appreciated. And Corey, thanks for your support, as with everyone who's sent them in so far. Are there any good defensive linemen in next year's draft that we should keep an eye out for? I'll quickly give you some names from the list that I've done. Obviously, Will Anderson could be the number 1 overall pick. Certainly will be a top 2 or 3 pick, I would suggest. I think Brian Bresee is an incredible athlete. He's got a lot of potential. He's just not quite showing it as an impact pass rusher at the moment. He's very solid and very stout, but I want to see a bit more pass rushing from him if he's going to take the next step. Marzi Smith at Michigan. I really like what he's shown. Very athletic, more of a nose tackle, though. Not someone who's going to come in and necessarily be a big sack artist. A lot of people like Will McDonald, the defensive end at Iowa State. I think he's more potential than proven ability so far. I've not seen a lot in Nolan Smith, the defensive end at Georgia. A lot of people are pumping him up. I'm not convinced yet, personally. I just don't think he's quite that impact player. And I think Jalen Carter's more of a late first than the sort of the top 5 lock that a lot of people are suggesting. Aside from that, I've not seen a great deal. The guy at Wisconsin looks okay on the interior. I can't remember his name. His first name's Keanu. It's not Reeves. Apart from that, there's not a great deal. You know, I'm not looking at a great D-line draft here. And I think Will Anderson is going to be so coveted. I think teams are really going to want to take him very, very, very early, and he could easily be the number 1 overall pick. So I'm sorry, Corey, I haven't got great news for you there. And there's nobody kind of really emerging. So, yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you than that. I mean, obviously, if they'd saved some of their free agency money, they might have been able to go out and afford a veteran, but they've spent most of it. Despite the fact the media is still saying they've got loads to spend. They do not have loads to spend next year, I'm afraid. They have about as much to spend next year as they've had for the last few years, unless they can make some savings somewhere else, which is unlikely given that people like Poona Ford are out of contracts. And, well, maybe they won't be interested in keeping him anymore because he's not doing a great deal this year. It's just, I don't know. It's hard to know, Robbie. Are we going to be talking about anything different? You know, when the Seahawks win, are we still going to be kind of having some of these conversations? It just feels like this is going to be a slog, and we did anticipate it this year that it's going to be a slog. But I kind of thought it might be a more fun slog than this. I mean, for example, I thought if nothing else, Rashad Penny might still look really good in the running game. And they through 3 games, they have not been able to recreate that running game magic that we saw at the end of last year.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping for, you know, just to see some young guys kind of develop and establish kind of those core pieces for the future. But it's looking like a lot of holes, more holes than I expected. So it's become less fun, I guess, if you will, watching the team. I had like no emotion watching the game today. Even when we scored, it was like I didn't feel like I used to feel when they would score. So there's a lot of things that need to change, and hopefully we'll see some guys develop, but Rob and I, Rob, you and I talked offline once, and I was like, I just want to fast forward to the end of the season so we can get to the draft, because that's all I'm really looking forward to. Now I'm focused a lot on the college season. I think I'm becoming a little disappointed, like Tyler Van Dyke getting benched this week and the way he's playing, and I was hoping for all these plethora of picks of quarterbacks that we could choose from, and now it's like it's Will Levis or no one. Unless there's a couple players that may step up, but I don't know. I'm coming very lethargic with it.
Yeah, in fairness, I think CJ Stroud has shown something. Well, he's shown more than something. And I'll get into that more in the video that I'm going to put out, but he's sort of like wow moments where you almost want to stand up and give him a standing ovation, even though I'm sat in my front room in Rotherham, which is thousands of miles away. But then there are also moments where you think, what the hell are you doing? And there are also, I cannot get away from the fact that Ohio State's offense is what it is. Like, here's an example of what they do at Ohio State. Right, okay. Let's go in for the snap. Let's get ready, guys. Let's go for the snap. Okay. Let me just check with the coach to see what I need to do on this play. Okay, yep, they're playing that coverage. Yep, so I need to throw it to him or him. Yeah, okay, let's do it then. And that's just not going to happen in the NFL. He's not going to. You don't get the chance to look over to the sideline and then tell you to do absolutely everything, and then you just do what the coach tells you to do. You don't have to read the defense. You don't have to do any adjustments. You don't have to do anything like that. And it's one of the reasons why Ohio State quarterbacks come into the league and they look like a fish out of water. Anyone who saw Justin Fields today, he was awful. And think of all the long list of quarterbacks that have come through Ohio State and have not done anything. It's because they're babied. And they also, not only they're babied, they get to play with like 10 first-round picks at receiver and tight end and on the offensive line. So it's very, very easy for them. But CJ Stroud is a very talented player, and he has shown something. He's got a lot of potential. It's just, you compare it to Will Levis, who's playing with 5 Jags on the offensive line, and he's been sacked 15 times in 4 games, and his receiver transferred from one of the teams in the ACC because his other one went to the NFL. He's got hardly anything to work with, no supporting cast really, and he's doing okay. So yeah, it might be down to those two and Bryce Young really in terms of the quarterback options for this year. Because I don't know if you saw, Robbie, Tyler Van Dyke was benched by Mario Cristobal because Mario Cristobal can't coach to save his life. Awful. Just awful.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what I was just saying. Like, it's sad that happened because he was one of the guys I was hyped up on,
Yeah, Cristobal's ruined him. But he'll either declare for the NFL draft or transfer, you would imagine, at the end of the year. And I would actually quite like to see him transfer and get a better shot at this. Unless, of course, he falls in round 2 and Seattle take him.
There's a little bit of consternation I can see in the comments about us low-hanging fruit and how talk about how we make the team better. I think the frustration for me this evening is that if they're going to lose games, like I think I said from week 1 that I can't guarantee if they're going to win 1 or 9 games this year because they're going to try and play coin toss games, and Geno isn't really the guy for the coin toss moment. He's not really proven himself to be clutch. So they want to play games like this, and unfortunately, you're going to live and die by the plays in the big moments. But I think to lose the way they did, if they lost 14-12, for example, and the defense put on a really good show, and they were solid, and Atlanta dug out some big plays because Kyle Pitts is a monster of a player, but the defense were good. There was structure, there was a strategy, and the offense really dug in and they tried to, they ground and pound and they scored a touchdown and maybe they miss a field goal or whatever. I think we could go with that and sit here and say, right, we can see what they're trying to do. And if they add this, this, and this, you could turn 14-12 into, 21-14. And that's a winning recipe. I think I'm sat here and I don't know what they can do without making wholesale changes to a lot of things to turn that, what we've seen this evening, into a championship team. And so I'm sorry if there's perceived negativity here, but I don't think that's what we're putting across. I think there's a bit of deflation and confusion as to what we can really do to try and offer positives, because they just look a long way away and further away than you would hope after a big draft, a couple of big drafts, but there still just look so many holes that where do you want us to start?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. What we need to make our team better is we need an offensive leader that's going to elevate the offense to a new level. That's going to make the players around him better. And the same thing on the defense. We need a defensive player who's going to come in and help other guys become better, put them in position. We need someone like a Cam Chancellor who's going to come in and set the tone for our defense, and everyone's going to follow that guy because he's going to be better. I'm not saying the players that we have are bad, but there was a lot of talk on the broadcast today about how, this has been great because we need new, we got new leadership and people are be able to step up into these new roles. Well, maybe some of these guys aren't the right leaders. Just because they step into that role doesn't make them the right leader. We need people to come in and elevate and make people around us better and make those players around them better. I think that's what we need. And I think we're sorely missing that.
Right, we need that, but we also need a fresh start. It just needs a fresh start. It needs to be new. You don't have to, like, teams win without Cam Chancellor types. You don't need necessarily that type. You may need it to play the way Pete Carroll wants to play, but it doesn't have to be that way. You could win with your DK Metcalfs and your Tyler Lockett's and your 3 tight ends and your Rashard Penny, who cost a first-round pick, and your Ken Walker, who cost a second-round pick, and your 2 tackles who are young and with high draft pick. There are plenty of teams out there winning with that level of investment, and you could just go and get your quarterback and you could go, we're going to be an offensive juggernaut and we're going to plan that way. They've got a second-round pick who, I joked in the comments section, I think he was working on Zoom. He was working from home today. D. Eskridge, you've spent a second-round pick on him. Was he actually contributing from home on Microsoft Teams, or was he actually at the stadium today? Like, these are the things that you can actually have that kind of vision, but you ain't gonna have that vision with Pete Carroll in charge. It needs to be a fresh start. And if people say, positivity and stuff like that, what do you want? What do you want from your Seahawks analysis and your conversation? Do you want 3 guys to come in here and go, oh, jolly hard luck, fellas, we'll come back again next week and hopefully it'll be better? We have this joke in England whereby footballers over here will just post, or they will have their representatives post these perfunctory tweets at the end of a loss. We go again. Fans were first class, but we'll go again next week. And everyone reads it and they just go, oh, F off, because they know that it's just nonsense. If you want us to come up here and go, oh, well, we go again next week, never mind. Hey, gosh darn it, that was so close to a victory. If you want us to do that, then fine. But it's not proper analysis. Or do you want an actual proper conversation? And I think most people do want a proper conversation about where the Seahawks are and where they're going. And they want it after the game. And they want us to get into these topics. They don't. And the few sort of the vocal minority want to piss and moan about the fact we're having this conversation. Whatever. You go on, you be you. You be whatever fans. If you want that kind of positivity and that relentless positivity and that you need that in your life, then there will be channels where you can go and find that. We're going to have a serious conversation about the Seahawks. I'm not going to apologize for that. We don't have to tailor for every single person. And I just wanted to pull up on something that Adam said. I don't always want to bring it back to 2011, but it felt to me like 2011 was the kind of season that you were asking for, Adam, when you were speaking earlier, to give a few examples. Yes, there were some, the opening game against San Francisco and the second game against Pittsburgh were horrible, but then they came out and they were fighting, scrapping and scratching like crazy against Arizona and won that game by 3 points. That was a decent Arizona team. And then they played Atlanta at home in the following week, and that was a good Atlanta team. They're expected to do things, and it was a shootout, 30 points to 28. They had that field goal right at the end, which could have won that game, and it was intense, and you felt, okay, that was high energy. And then they went to New York. They were expected to get hammered by the Giants, who were good. I think the Giants, did they win the Super Bowl that year, or were they the Super Bowl champions? Whatever it was, they were expected to get hammered by the Giants, and they won that game 36-25. Okay, they had a stinker against the Cleveland Browns with Charlie Whitehurst playing quarterback. And then I went all the way to Seattle to watch them lose to the Bengals. But that was the game when Richard Sherman covered his arse off against A.J. Green, and the birth of Sherman happened. So you came away from that game thinking, wow, that's another piece to go with Cam, to go with Earl Thomas, who, as you're building up this defense, and Brandon Brown on the other side, and they were hard-hitting, and they were physical, and they were brash. They went to Dallas. Again, were expected to get hammered. There was that big Cam Chancellor hit in that game against Dallas, which just, you could still hear it now. The echo of that hit is still reverberating around the globe. And you thought, wow, this team is arriving. It needs a quarterback. Tavares Jackson is not the answer, but and then they go and beat the Ravens. The Marshawn Lynch break the ankles of Ray Lewis game, as I know it. They go and hammer the Rams. They're expected to. They lost to the Washington team, and that was a horrible loss, but it was close, and they threw it away. But that's because they didn't have the quarterback. They didn't have the quarterback on the day. Then they come back and hammer the Eagles on prime time, brilliant win. Marshawn runs riot. They hammer the Rams. They destroy the Bears in Chicago, 38-14. And then they play Harbaugh's Niners, who were going to the NFC Championship game, and they give them a hell of a game. That was the first time that the Niners that season gave up 100 rushing yards. They had not given up 100 rushing yards all year, and then Marshawn got them 100 rushing yards in that game, and they could have won it. But again, they didn't have the quarterback in the last week of the season. They lose to Arizona in overtime. So what? Whatever. Who cares? It was better for draft position anyway. Okay, like that was a season where you came away. They just need a quarterback. They need the quarterback. They need the quarterback. They need to get that quarterback, and they got Russell Wilson. And that's the kind of season you need to see. And right now, I don't feel we're getting the grit, the direction. I don't think players are necessarily emerging. People will force Tariq Woolen into the Richard Sherman role. I'm not prepared to go there myself just yet. I'll admit that I'm encouraged by him, but not going there just yet. And I just want to see a bit more from that. If they're going to have losses, be a bit more like those 2011 losses than what we're seeing at the moment, because they've got their asses kicked last week by San Francisco, and that was miserable. And today the defense was pathetic against Atlanta. So there we go. And I've noticed the spam in the live chat, and I'm going to get rid of it, guys. So don't worry. Have you got any closing thoughts, Robbie? And if anybody has a late super chat, send it in now. But we are going to wrap things up in a second. Robbie, have you got a closing thought?
No, I don't really have anything specific to say. Just, I mean, I just, if to anything I want to see going forward, I just want to see some improvement somewhere. Maybe it's get the running game going, get some of these guys going. I do see some, some hope in Tariq Woolen. Like, I like that, but I want to see more. There's just things that I'm hoping to see, but there's still a lot of holes that we need to fill. And I'm hoping to kind of build that nucleus that you're talking about. So we are just a quarterback away,
Adam?
Yeah, I think they either need to. I don't think the constant references to 2011, and I think they have done that. Like the team have mentioned that it feels like that. So it's not just fans that are conflating one or the other. I think those become almost less helpful than anything, because they're not really built like that team was in the first place. That which is fine, because as you say, just become an offensive juggernaut. But if you become so tied to something that you're not, you can end up doubling down and just being a worse version of what was good. And trying to seek that out in 2022 to become 2012 could be a real death knell. So I would suggest to them that maybe the ethos of starting from scratch may be a sensible way to do it. But the constant references to what that was, I mean, they're miles off that team, which is fine, because they can build their own path and do it differently. But trying to think, we're going to be like that team and plug in a quarterback, I think, could be one of the more dangerous things that the front office and Pete Carroll could do.
Yeah, I just want to see them play with a similar degree of confidence building, and I think that's what 2011 would. That's my reference to it. Is more that I could feel green shoots emerging, whereas with this, I just see more of the same. That's it. It's more of the same issues. Year after year after year. The only difference now is Russell Wilson isn't there. I know people think Russell Wilson's rubbish now because he started badly, but he wasn't rubbish in 2018 or 2019 and stuff like that. And he would often bring them out of a hole in games like this, and he ain't there anymore, and he ain't doing it. So that's really where I come from. A couple of quick final points. Big shout out to the Seahawks people who run the Twitter account, because I don't know. They seem to. They seem to do a great job of having a bit of fun with this. So I love the fact they've just put a tweet out saying, almost like their highlights from the game, sponsored by Ashley Home Store, the Tight End Production, Geno's fast start, and the mistakes on the defensive end of things. And it's just like that's kind of crept in there at the end, which is like the big story of the game. But at least they mentioned it. At least they didn't pretend that it didn't happen. And the other thing I wanted to mention today is, I don't know if you saw this guy, bit of light relief at the end. But did you see the Miami Dolphins punt in their own end zone today, where the punter kicked the ball right up the protector's arse, and it hit him in the arse, right in the middle of the arse, and flew behind for a safety? It has to be the single greatest safety I think we will ever see in the NFL. Right off his arse.
That was pretty great.
Yeah, I'm lifting this from something that I saw on Twitter, but if my now 8-week-old son ever asks me how footballs are born, I'm going to show him that picture and as a still, and that can be his reference point.
You're on mute, Rob.
I was saying the still is a great picture because the ball hits him and you can kind of see, well, it's hitting his arse and it's kind of like rippling as the ball's hitting it, and then you just perfect. Honestly, I laughed at that for about 10 minutes.
I mean, it cost Doug Baldwin 15 yards in the Super Bowl doing something like that, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I laughed at that for 15 minutes, and then I remembered I had to watch the Seahawks later, and also that I'm going to watch England again tomorrow. So, oh my word! So I am glutton for punishment. Let's go for the hat trick of defeats, miserable defeats tomorrow when they play Germany. Anyway, fellas, it's always
if it's any consolation for you, Rob, I'm currently celebrating my new year. And so normally, you know, for a new year for you guys, you know, the season's normally over. It's all out with the old, in with the new. But I have to start my new year with a performance that is so similar to last year that it's just, you know, I don't even get a fresh start, which is very, very disappointing for me. Out with the old and continuing with the old. That's basically what it is today for you. Well, Adam, congratulations on your celebration. I hope you're having a great time despite the Seahawks. At least Spurs weren't around to ruin anything this weekend. Thank goodness for that.
Although I did see something about Antonio Conte being linked with Juventus, but you know, there we go. So we'll move on from that. Robbie, great to have you with us. Adam, great to have you with us. Check out the Pedestrian Podcast where you'll find Adam. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for your company again tonight. Check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Tomorrow I will have that article about all of the quarterbacks in the 2023 draft. Which will be on there in written form tomorrow, and I will try and get a video out on Tuesday as well to accompany that. Until next time, see you later. Bye for now. Subscribe to the channel, and bye for now.